Hello, hello. Hello, good afternoon and good evening. My name is Madelin. I'm an organizer with the Amalgamated Transit Union in Canada. We're the union that represents transit workers. And I'm also a transit rider myself and one of the two facilitators on today's rally. We are broadcasting this webinar from Treaty 13 territory. This is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. My role this evening is to welcome you to this digital rally to keep transit moving. We have folks joining us from across this land called Canada. Hello to our transit allies in Moncton, Edmonton, Montreal, Vancouver, and St. John. Hello to members of Regina Citizens Public Transit Coalition, to the Hamilton Transit Riders Union, to Ottawa Transit Riders, and to the members of Functional Transit Winnipeg. And hello to transit workers and riders from coast to coast. We're so pleased you're here. Today, we've come together to rally to win sustainable transit funding and to support the post-pandemic recovery and to make funding for transit permanent. And we are in the majority in our ask. An ECOS Post poll commissioned by the David Suzuki Foundation just last month demonstrates that 83% of those surveyed believe that governments have a responsibility to ensure people can access safe and affordable transit. And that's what we'll be working on rallying for together this evening. Now I'm going to pass it over to my co-facilitator, Dylan, for his opening remarks.
Thanks so much, Madeline, and thanks everyone for joining us. This is really an amazing gathering to see so many people coming together to fight for public transit from coast to coast to coast. And really the fight to defend and expand public transit is also about more than funding. It's about priorities. It's about building a bigger vision. And it really can and must be a part of our collective fight for climate justice. And it's about addressing the injustice of those who've done the least to cause the crises we're facing and being impacted the most. And really, we can build the kind of power that we need to win expanded public transit service from coast to coast by recognizing the intersections and building power in our communities. And it's about building a just transition to shift from manufacturing gas-powered cars to electric transit vehicles. It's about taking that manufacturing into public ownership so that people in communities and governments that represent them don't have to depend on goodwill from corporations that never arrives and to get us out of these crises. And it's about ensuring people can distance safely during this pandemic. It's also about affordable, green, public housing near transit stations, instead of doing what the City of Ottawa is doing, where it's evicting people from affordable housing to make way for a transit station. It's also about accessibility and dramatically improving and expanding public transit service for people with disabilities. It's about racism, including how racialized communities face the most barriers to safe, affordable, accessible public transit. And it's about colonialism and genocide, and how allowing intercity bus service to remain in private hands led to the service cuts on the Highway of Tears in BC, despite the Truth and Reconciliation call to action for more accessible transit along that route to prevent more missing and murdered Indigenous women. And it's about creating decent work with thousands more low-carbon jobs. And it's about building public transit that serves urban, suburban, and rural communities, including bringing back intercity bus service under public ownership. It's about keeping transit public, resisting the privatization of service and infrastructure, because privatization costs more, it undermines workers' rights, it undermines democracy and accountability, and it's worse for the climate. So transit needs to be a pillar of our just recovery and a Green New Deal that includes all of those areas and more to bring about the transformative change that we need. Because if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that we can't go back to normal, because normal was the problem. But we need to get organized to make it happen. We need you to join the Keep Transit Moving Coalition and help build a political force that can't be ignored. You can visit keeptransitmoving.ca, you can take action there, and you can join one of the transit groups in your community. If there isn't one, you can start one. So thanks again, and you're about to hear from some incredible speakers and the organizing they're involved in from coast to coast.
Great. Thanks, Dylan. So let me introduce the speakers for this evening. First, we'll hear from Nino. He's ATU Canada's president, and he was a maintenance worker from Toronto's TTC, which is ATU Local 113. Next, we'll hear from Zainab, who's a volunteer with TTC Riders, also in Toronto. Then we'll hear from Tina, who's a concerned citizen in St. John, New Brunswick. And then from Laura, who's an organizer with Free Transit Edmonton and a communications officer with Public Interest Alberta and a freelance writer. Following that, we'll hear from Brian, who's a member of the Saskatchewan Seniors Mechanism, which is an umbrella organization composed of 18 member organizations advocating on behalf of older adults in Saskatchewan. Then we'll come to Ottawa, where we'll hear from Sally, an accessible transit advocate. And finally, we'll hear from Mark, who's a paratransit driver and a trainer in Vancouver since 1980, and also the president of ATU Local 1724. So let me bring up our first speaker, Nino. The mic is yours.
Hey, everybody. Good evening. I'm so super excited to be here tonight. While we're traveling through and dealing with this pandemic, I want to take this opportunity to thank Madelin and Dylan for putting this together, and the Council of Canadians who are driving this rally tonight. So thank you very much for all your hard work. But I'm really excited to be here because, in this pandemic, what we're learning is what we already knew, that transit cannot survive on fare box revenues. And transit riders and transit workers have been advocating for this for quite some time, that we need operational dollars to keep transit moving across this country. And so over the first wave of the pandemic, what we knew was exploited with the shortfall of revenues. There was a call for communities and rider groups and advocates to get together across this country and build a coalition. And that's why we're here tonight. Build a coalition of transit groups and people who depend on transit, our marginalized communities, our essential workers. They need to get to and from work every day, and we need sustainable transit. And so we put this program together so that we could reach out to every community across this country and all talk in the same language and all talk about the things that need to get done. And that's put pressure on governments to dedicate operational funding to transit so we can have sustainable transit, and we can have transit that is reasonable, that is economical and safe for all Canadians. This is not just about transit. It is a gender issue. It's a racial issue, and it is, quite frankly, a mobility issue that needs to be addressed. And so we saw the fall economic statement that happened yesterday, and the fall economic statement had some indicators about some promising commitments in the near future about how they're going to invest in operational funding. But there was no concrete indications that the ongoing operational funding will happen forever and a day. And we need to take that, and we need to work with this group and all Canadians and all communities across this country to make that happen. And we're going to do it by lobbying governments, and we're going to do it by our activism, by building coalitions and putting pressure on the politicians to make that happen. And so, the first start is doing what we're doing here tonight. The second part of it is, what do we do after tonight's rally? I encourage all of you to get on your phones, use your emails, contact your MPs, your city councilors, other public officials, and let them know how much transit means to you and to your community. And we can win this fight, and we can do it together, and we will do it one step at a time, working with all of you. Thank you, and back to you, Madelin.
Awesome. Thanks for starting us off. Zainab, the mic is yours.
Hi, my name is Zainab Hussein. I'm a York University graduate. I wrote a research paper about the Somali community public transportation problems in Toronto. The other day, my problem was that I went on the bus. It was a 46 Martin Grove bus. I was just going to TD Bank near my house. I had my daughter in a stroller, and the bus was crowded. And I felt like a lot of high school students came in because they were also on the bus, and I felt uncomfortable. I almost felt like I didn't know where to stand. And I got a bit frustrated because if only another bus came, we would all be accommodated and it wouldn't have been so crowded. And I think it's very important to understand that especially with the pandemic, that public transit has to be safe for people. And another problem that I have is with the fare box recovery ratio system. The fare box recovery ratio system is not fair. I don't think it's equitable. I did a research paper on the Somali community public transportation problems in Toronto, and I found out that the biggest issue my community had was the cost of bus fare in Toronto. And I think the cost of bus fare is not fair. I think if anything, the lesson we learned in the pandemic is that everyone is struggling, everyone has bills to pay, and to pay for bus fare in Toronto that's constantly increasing is not fair for not only the Somali community, but for all low-income communities, because people are trying to just survive and make ends meet. And so I do believe it is very important that we come together as people who care about transit, as transit advocates, transit advocate people, and we care about it. We ask the federal government to make a sincere commitment to federally fund public transit, because relying on fare box recovery ratio will make us continue in the cycle of making people pay for bus fare and making people have a lot of expense that they don't need to. So I want federal government to make sincere commitment to fund public transit. I also want people to join a group, because it's one thing for you to be passionate about something. It's another where are the groups that actually do is a good group, because it's a group that is right about it cares with TTC riders, because I want more, because I learned more through my research. And so I thought, let me join a group, and I think everyone should get involved. And if you want to get involved and if you're interested in helping transit, please go to www.ttcriders.ca/fund-TTC. I think we can all do our part to make public transit more affordable and more safe. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great day.
Amazing. Thanks, Zainab. All right, our next speaker is Tina. Tina.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me here. Transit is something that I've noticed in our city in St. John, New Brunswick, and in New Brunswick, and I actually work in the insolvency field, and I actually deal with people across the country that they talk about the most. They need to be able to get to their jobs. We need to be able to get to our doctor's appointments. We need to be able to get to the hospitals, and we need to be able to get there safely, especially in a pandemic. And what we need is federal funding, provincial funding, and municipal funding. And we need it across all levels of government, because we need to support our communities first if we're going to have a healthy community. And if you want to reestablish this economy, you need to support your essential workers, such as your transit workers, and such as the essential workers who are taking transit to get to work. We need that. And what we need is we need it at a suburban level, we need it at an urban level, and we definitely need it at a rural level, especially here in New Brunswick. And what we need is for transit to be funded fully so that there is no cost. You shouldn't have to put money in to ride the bus. It should be exactly like walking into a library and getting a book. Your bus ride should be funded like an infrastructure, and we need that. So what I urge all of you to do is exactly what Zainab said: join a group. And if you don't find a group, start a group. And if you're in New Brunswick, reach out to me. You'll see me on the ATU Twitter page. I'm sure they're going to retweet me. Please sign up. And if you don't want to do that, email or mail your mayor, your local MLAs, your MPs, mail and email your Prime Minister, email everybody who's in charge of your government and tell them you want accessible, free funding across the entire country, because it's what we deserve and it's what we need to get over this pandemic. Thank you so much for having me.
Right on. Thanks, Tina. And I'll give you a little spoiler alert for all the folks who are on the call. We have a call to action at the end of this. So at 8 o'clock, once we've wrapped up the speakers, you will leave with a tangible action that you can walk away with. And also, I love everyone in the chat. Keep that up. All right, we're going to hear from Laura now. Go for it, Laura.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Kruse, and I'm an organizer with Free Transit Edmonton. Free Transit Edmonton is a coalition campaign of climate organizers, students, seniors, and workers who believe that mobility is a human right. We are building a movement towards a just and equitable city where all of us have the ability to get where we need to go. Our goal is simple: good and free transit. We want our governments to stop collecting user fees to subsidize our public transportation systems. We want to see public transit funded like our libraries, schools, hospitals, and other public services, open and accepting of all, regardless of their ability to pay. And we want to see our transit service expanded and improved with a system that is so safe, accessible, and reliable that it is the preferred method of transportation for every Edmontonian. We see this as a cornerstone of the local fight for economic, social, and climate justice, and a key intervention into creating a better world as we work towards a just recovery and a Green New Deal, which puts workers and citizens first before corporate shareholders and CEOs. But we can't do this alone. While our campaign is focused on our city, we need our activists and advocates to be agitating at all levels of government. We know a huge goal like ours requires significant investment, permanent federal investment of public dollars into a system which is wholly publicly owned and publicly delivered. As the pandemic has decimated the ability for public transit systems to recoup their costs through fare collection, we see how essential permanent, sustainable funding is to the future of our public transit systems. It is not hyperbolic to say that this crisis could permanently change public transportation as we know it. Our systems have been underfunded for decades. This crisis is highlighting the slow erosion of our public services over the last 40 years. We already see encroaching privatization in first kilometer, last kilometer policy options, and we could very well see our essential public services handed over to rideshare companies like Uber, furthering inequalities in transit access, creating even more economic precarity in our workforce, decimating good, green union jobs, all while enriching tech billionaires at our own cost. The federal government has the key opportunity to reverse decades of damage here and now, and we need to fight like hell to make sure it happens for the sake of our climate, our economy, our communities, and our future. Thank you.
Yes, yes, just so much yes, Laura. All right, now we're going to hear from Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian. I'm a member of the board of directors of the Saskatchewan Seniors Mechanism. Our volunteer organization brings together seniors groups from across the province to advocate on the behalf of older adults in Saskatchewan. We did a significant research project in 2018, doing forums and focus groups and asking older adults what their primary concerns were. And the backdrop was we believe and still believe that our provincial government needs to take the lead in developing a strategy to support positive aging for Saskatchewan. One of the areas of concern that we looked at was transportation. What seniors told us is that accessible and affordable public transportation is important to them for getting to medical or other appointments, to get their groceries, prescriptions, other essential items, to participate in their community, and to visit their family and friends. A backdrop piece to this is in 2017, the provincial government killed the Saskatchewan Transportation Company, which provided services in several hundred communities throughout the province. It was a publicly funded, publicly supported system, but the government chose to kill it because it wasn't making money. So they regarded it as a business rather than a service, and this had a significant impact for older adults living in smaller communities who needed to get to the regional centers for their medical appointments and so forth. People told us they've had to move into the regional centers where they don't necessarily have friends or family in order to be able to take care of their needs, particularly their health needs. We heard from residents in urban communities really the same things. They need the public transportation for the same reasons, but it is not always adequate to meet their needs. We have a paratransit system, for example, that many older adults take part in, which is overbooked. There is not enough service available to meet all the needs, and there's not sufficient funding to take care of that. So I see my 3 minutes are pretty much up, so I'm going to stop right there. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian, for that perspective. I think we can all appreciate the challenges that would be compounded by not only losing a system that service so many communities, but then in addition to that, having to move. Not right. Absolutely unright. Not right. All right. Next, we'll hear from Sally. Hi, Sally.
Hi, I'm Sally Thomas, not Thompson. I'm from Ottawa, part of the Ottawa Transit Riders, particularly interested in para-parity. I helped form a group a few years ago, which we named para-parity. And as the name suggests, we are aiming to get parity between our accessible service and the conventional service of OC Transpo. The reasons are that most of the people who use paratranspo in Ottawa, probably more than half of them, are low income people who live with on low incomes and on social assistance, and therefore cannot afford to drive. Myself, I moved here from a smaller community in Ontario called Belleville. For those of you who don't know, it's about halfway to Toronto. It's a much smaller community. It didn't have paratransit until after I left there. I moved here so that I would be able to get around by myself. And I made a conscious decision not to get a license or a car because I thought I live in a big enough city that they'll have accessible transit. And the longer I live here, the better it will get. Well, the opposite has happened. The longer I've lived here, the worse it's gotten. And so I'm endeavoring to change that. Right now, you have to book more than 24 hours in advance to go anywhere. And on the conventional bus, of course, you can walk to the bus stop and get on the bus whenever you choose. That's one thing we're looking to change. We're also looking to change to get an app going so that we can find out where our buses are. You can already do that on the conventional side. Can't do that on the para side. We just recently got online booking, more than 10 years behind Toronto. I remember going to Toronto for a trip more than 10 years ago, and I booked my rides for Wheel-Trans from my living room in Ottawa, and it worked out. I even missed the bus and I still got to where I was going on time, which is unheard of here in Ottawa. Like the other speakers said, paratransport is way overrun, not well managed, and they seem to think it's a business. Public transit is not a business. Public transit has never been a business. Public transit doesn't work as a business, and they should not try to work it as a business. And to make people pay for an ever decreasing level of service is just unjust. Our city has again voted 8-3 in favor of a fare increase when, you know, the buses don't show up. They show up 20 minutes late. You know, they take you to the wrong address. They charge you extra for going to an address that's still in Ottawa, but just because it's further away, well, you have to pay more. So I just think it's wrong to charge people more money and give them less.
Well, we agree with you, Sally. And I'm sorry if I misspoke earlier with your name. Thank you so much for your comments.
Yeah.
Okay, we have the last speaker on our list. He is a transit worker since 1980. Mark, can you share what your experience is?
I want to thank Sally for her work. I've been involved in paratransit for 40 years, and it's an often just overlooked part of transit. You know, meanwhile, our planet is choking, and transit is a solution, and governments are ignoring that solution. We need to rebuild the economy. People need to get to work. The people that we love need to get to work and rebuild the economy, especially those people that can't afford to pollute the atmosphere in their cars, and yet the government ignores us. More importantly, in regards to paratransit and transit as a whole, transit provides life. Paratransit provides life for people, quality of life. It gives people an opportunity to escape from house arrest. It gives them the opportunity to seek medical treatment, to go and get their food that they need. These people are our mothers and our fathers and our sisters and our brothers. And the trade union movement says sisters and brothers and sisters and brothers. We have to do something to build a fight back against this neoconservative idea that transit isn't worth funding. And we in Vancouver, the paratransit in Vancouver has been privatized for 40 years. And because of that, our clients are underserved. Every single tax dollar needs to go to serving the people that need it so that we can breathe, so that we can work, and so that we can live. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for those comments, Mark. Okay, folks, we made it to the end in the best way possible. We heard from amazing speakers this evening, and now I have a call to action. So this is for everyone who heard from our speakers tonight and thought, you're right, I need to do something about this. So the call to action this evening is pretty straightforward. You're going to be calling your member of parliament, you're going to be calling the Prime Minister, and you're going to be calling the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland. I've just put the action tool in the chat. If you can't see it, I'm going to verbally speak it. It's on keeptransitmoving.ca, and you'll go to the call action. So we know that there were some promising statements yesterday from the federal government, but we want to make sure that operating funding is in the federal budget in 2021 and forever moving forward. And so we have to keep this on the radar of our elected officials. We asked each of the panelists tonight to talk about what transit means to them and what it would mean if transit was funded properly. And so we need you to answer that exact question. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to the link that's in the chat. You're going to type in your own phone number and you're going to get a call on your own phone. And you are going to speak to the voicemail box, because nobody's working right now, of your MP, your Deputy Prime Minister, and your Prime Minister. And if you're a little bit shy like me on the phone, this is the perfect time to do it. We'll be following up with you to make sure you do it, but please, this is the most important action that we can leave with tonight, is sending a cohesive message that transit matters and that it matters that it shows up in the federal budget. And to so many of our panelists' points tonight, this should be a public service that we can be proud of. And so please, everyone, done, amazing. Thank you. That's super. I'm going to put it in the chat again. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Dylan. Dylan, do you have any final remarks?
Well, I just want to say thanks again so much for everyone joining us tonight. We're hoping this is just going to be an important step towards bigger and more powerful organizing as well. And we look forward to working with all of you to continue to build this movement, to continue to build this coalition, and to continue to build in our communities, because that's really where the power is. If we want our elected officials to listen to us, they're not necessarily going to do it out of the goodness of their hearts, although that would be wonderful if that was the case. But really, governments respond when we get organized and when we build power in our communities, and that's really what this is about. And that's what I'm generally working on at the Council of Canadians as a climate campaigner, and what people around the table in this coalition and a whole bunch of organizations are working on nationally and in their communities as well. And so would again just really encourage folks, in addition to making that important call to your elected officials right now, to, if you're not already involved in one of the groups in this coalition in your community, we definitely encourage you to do so, or as others have suggested, start one in your community as well. And if you want some help with that, get in touch, and we can see what we might be able to do to help with that, because the more grassroots pressure we can exert, the more we're going to be able to win the funding that we need and build a just transition and Green New Deal for public transit. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us.
Stay safe all. Bye.